You are tuned to the legendary KYOK, 1140 AM and all new 106.5 FM. You're now tuned to the CWA Civil Rights Talk Show, an hour of power. Here's your host, Errol Minor.
Good morning, Houston. Welcome back to Communication Workers of America, CWA Human Rights Hour Power, a justice-filled hour of talk, solidarity, and worker power. We've hit a huge milestone. It's our 10th episode this morning. You're tuned into KYOK 1140 AM and the all-new 106.5 FM. If you are on the go, you can take us with you on kyokradio.org. From those April showers, we are seeing beautiful flowers. It's almost summer. The days are getting longer, and we have more time to get outside and let our union voices be heard. Let our union voices ring in every district from Alaska to Maine, from Texas to Minnesota. Our union brothers, sisters, and siblings at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette have been outside for 581 days, 18 months striking on the picket lines, and yet while they are striking, they are still churning out the news with facts for you and me. Let's show our support to them by making sure we subscribe to unionprogress.com. Once you subscribe to this free publication, how about going over and donating to their strike fund? Donate to the strike fund by going over to cwa.org/PPG-donate. And I just heard someone shout, when we fight, we win. Our brothers and sisters and siblings at Maximus are still fighting for a contract. And we ask that you continue to support the workers of Maximus and their families by going over to cwa.org/CCW Solidarity Fund. May is recognized as Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month, an annual celebration acknowledging the historical and cultural contributions of individuals of Asian and Pacific Islander descent to the United States. AAPI Heritage Month 2024 will take place from Wednesday, May 1st to Friday, May 31st. The United States officially recognized Asian American and Pacific Islander contributions in the late 1970s. It took over a decade to establish a permanent month-long celebration. In 1977, Frank Horton, a New York representative, proposed House Joint Resolution 540. It called for the first 10 days of May to be recognized as Asian Pacific American Heritage Week. Hawaii Senator Daniel Aoi introduced a similar joint resolution the same year. However, both resolutions failed to pass. The following year, Representative Horton proposed House Joint Resolution 1007, which requested the president to proclaim a week during the first 10 days of May, starting in 1979. The week would include May 7th and 10th and would be recognized as Asian Pacific American Heritage Week. On October 5th, 1978, President Jimmy Carter signed Public Law 95-419 after the House and the Senate passed the resolution. From 1980 to 1990, each president issued annual proclamations for Asian Pacific American Heritage Week. In 1990, Congress expanded the observance from a week to a month. In 1992, May was officially designated as Asian Pacific American Heritage Month by President George H.W. Bush with the passing of Public Law 102-450. In 2009, the month was renamed as AAPI Heritage Month. Following the influx of Chinese laborers in the U.S., Japanese and Korean immigrants began to migrate to the United States in 1885 to work in the farming, fishing, and railroad construction industries. This was driven by the increased demand for labor in these sectors, as well as the need to replace Chinese labor, which had been excluded by the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882. However, in 1907, the U.S. and Japan entered into a gentleman's agreement that restricted Japanese immigration. This agreement stemmed from growing concerns about the number of Japanese immigrants entering the U.S. and the perceived threat they pose to American labor and society. The agreement stated that the U.S. would not impose any formal restrictions on Japanese immigration, but that Japan would voluntarily limit the number of Japanese immigrants to the U.S. This agreement marked a significant turning point in U.S. immigration policies, as it was the first time such an agreement had been reached between the U.S. and a foreign country. It also had a profound impact on the Japanese immigrant community, as it led to increased discrimination and marginalization. Despite these challenges, however, Japanese immigrants continued to make significant contributions to American society and culture, particularly in the fields of agriculture, fishing, and technology. The civil rights movement played a crucial role in liberalizing the immigration laws of the United States. The 1965 Immigration and Nationality Act brought significant changes to the previously restrictive national origin quotas. As a result of this act, large numbers of Asian and Pacific Islanders were allowed to migrate to the United States along with their families. Additionally, in the mid-1970s, refugees from South Asia, particularly from war-torn countries like Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos, came to the United States to escape violence and hardship. Over the past 2 decades, the United States has witnessed a significant surge in the Asian population, with the group growing by 81% between 2000 and 2019. According to a recent analysis by the Pew Research Center, this demographic shift has made Asian American and Pacific Islanders the fastest growing racial group in the country. The increase in population can be attributed to a range of factors, including immigration, higher birth rates, and an influx of international students. Despite this rapid growth, Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders continue to face unique challenges and experiences, including discrimination and stereotypes that can negatively impact their social and economic opportunities. The term AAPI encompasses various cultures from the entire Asian continent, which includes East, Southeast, and South Asia, as well as the Pacific Islands of Melanesia, Micronesia, and Polynesia. According to the 2020 U.S. Census, there are approximately 20.6 million individuals of Asian and Pacific Islander descent in the United States. According to the Pew Research Center, AAPI people constitute about 7% of the total U.S. populations. Asians have faced discrimination, racism, and violence since they immigrated to the United States. In the 1850s, Chinese workers in San Francisco were subjected to abuse, robbery, and murder. Moreover, in 1854, the California Supreme Court issued a ruling in People versus Hall, stating that people of Asian descent were not allowed to testify against white people in court. This meant that white people could escape punishment for anti-Asian crimes they committed. From 1942 to 1945, people of Japanese descent were forcibly imprisoned in internment camps across the United States during World War II. In 1982, Vincent Chin, a Chinese American, was killed by 2 white men in Detroit because they believed that Asians were taking jobs in the auto industry from white Americans. In March 2021, a man shot and killed 6 women of Asian descent at 3 spas in Atlanta region. Amidst the outbreak of COVID-19, there were a surge in discriminatory and racist remarks regarding the origin of the virus. This led to an increase in anti-Asian violence and racism, with individuals of Asian American and Pacific Islanders descent being subjected to verbal and physical abuse, harassment, and even murder across various U.S. cities. In response to this, the AAPI Equity Alliance, Chinese for Affirmative Action, and the Asian American Studies Department of San Francisco State University collaborated to launch the Stop AAPI Hate Coalition on March 19, 2020. The coalition aims to monitor and address cases of violence, hate, harassment, discrimination, shunning, and bullying against individuals of AAPI descent. In January 2021, the White House issued a memorandum condemning and combating racism, xenophobia, and intolerance against AAPI in the United States. The memorandum acknowledged that xenophobic sentiments had been fueled by the AAPI community and proposed ways to prevent discrimination, harassment, bullying, and hate crimes against AAPI individuals. The Federal Asian Pacific American Council, FAPAC, announced that the theme for the AAPI Heritage Month 2024 is advancing leaders through innovation. The FAPAC urges local and national governments to prioritize creating opportunities for individuals in the AAPI community to develop their skills and improve their leadership abilities. May is recognized as AAPI Heritage Month because it marks the arrival of the first Japanese immigrants to the United States on May 7th, 1843. Additionally, May is significant because it commemorates Golden Spike Day on May 10th, 1869, which celebrates the completion of the Transcontinental Railroad. This railroad was significant contributions this railroad was built with significant contributions from Chinese workers, making it an important moment in American history. On CWA Human Rights Our Power today, we have discussing international labor unity and hate and bias toward the Asian community. Here with us this morning, we have Jeeva Muhil. Good morning, Jeeva, and welcome to the show.
I'm so excited.
We're so excited to have you with us this morning. Will you please tell us a little about yourself?
Sure. So my name is Jeeva. I actually came out of Unite Here 274 in Philadelphia. I started as a shop steward up in the airport, and then I worked with the Service Employees International Union for a while, and got started with an organization where I work now called Global Labor Justice. And at Global Labor Justice, we coordinate with union partners in the Global South and mobilize workers in the US and North America to put pressure on employers from both sides of the supply chain.
Now, we must lay the groundwork for our listening audience. There are a few terms I would like to define before we delve into this conversation. Will you please define caste or caste oppressed?
Yeah, so cost is a system, specifically cost oppressed typically refers to in India. It's this religiously justified economic hierarchy that's based on hereditary occupation. But there have been strides in anti-casteism in terms of like affirmative action programs, but there is still, like in the US, very lasting economic disparities as a result of cost, and there's still ongoing conflicts and attacks on people of oppressed castes.
Okay. And one of the other terms or the acronyms that I want to also define for our listening audience, GBVH, what does that stand for?
It stands for gender-based violence and harassment. It's like an umbrella term kind of covering the full spectrum of harassment based on sexual harassment, transphobia, just general violence against women, but also sexual assault, including things up the ladder.
All right. You are here this morning to discuss the fight for the heist campaign. Can you tell us, lay the groundwork for the Fight the Heist campaign?
Yeah, so the Fight the Heist campaign is with Global Labor Justice and our long-term partners, the Asia Floor Wage Alliance. We've been working with them for 10 years, and they've convened a coalition of over 20 unions from 6 different garment-producing countries. And we're fighting to bring 7 major brands to the table to negotiate with our union coalition. We want to set the stage for wage bargaining at a regional level between unions and brands. I think like to really get into the Fight the Heist campaign, it's important to know who the workers of the garment industry are and why they're fighting. So the majority of garment industry workers, the vast majority of them are women in South and Southeast Asia, countries like Bangladesh, India, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, Cambodia, Indonesia. And most of them are breadwinners for large families. Most of them are internal migrants because most of them move close to where the factories are to work there. And most of them are on the country minimum wage, which ranges from about $70 a month to $200 a month. And
Okay. I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, you can go first.
All right. So what countries are involved in the Fight the Heist?
So our partners are primarily from the countries I named: Sri Lanka, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Cambodia. We do have partners in other countries. We also, like, Vietnam is very important to the garment supply chain in general. We're less connected over there. But this is a coalition of the 20 unions fighting for the brands to sit down with them and bargain specifically.
All right. Which companies are involved or engaged in perpetuating the inequalities in the region?
So the Fight the Heist campaign is going after 7 major brands. We have been focusing on Nike as our worst actor, A, because they're like one of the leading fashion brands in the entire world. But B, because in 2020, we saw brands cancel their orders in mass. And in the garment supply chain, what happened is, as brands canceled orders for things that had already been made or negotiated discounts, the supplier factories pushed all of those losses down onto the workers. And so the Asia Floor Wage Alliance did a survey of over 2,000 workers across multiple countries and found people lost on average about 3 months of pay. And people got into incredibly desperate situations, as you can imagine. People lost their houses. People went into major debt to pay for food. People took their kids out of school because some places don't have free public education. And at the same time as that was happening in 2020, when we found out via research by the New York Times that Nike did not pay federal income taxes in 2020, but at the same time they were laying off all these workers, the Nike founding family, the Knight family, who are still the majority shareholders, paid themselves $74 million in dividends. And then in 2021, as the Asia Floor Wage Alliance report came out and there were calls to pay workers out, instead of doing that, they authorized $18 billion in stock buybacks, which is essentially kind of a way to filter money through the largest shareholders. Companies price their own stock and then resell it to themselves. But the demands of the campaign are that companies sit down and negotiate a solution to the missing 3 months of pay, a living wage for the supply chain at a regional level that's calculated according to regional cost of living, and an end to billionaire payouts until workers are paid back.
Okay, and the fight for the heist campaign has resulted in the creation of the first ever enforceable brand agreement known as the Dindigul Agreement. How was this agreement formed?
So this is actually, the Dindigul Agreement was created out of a different campaign. It's actually a little separate from the Fight the Heist campaign, though it is one of, with several of the same union partners. But the Dindigul Agreement came out of a campaign called Justice for Jayashree after a really atrocious event where a 21-year-old garment worker named Jayashree, who was part of her union committee, was murdered by her supervisor after months of harassment. And in the wake of her murder, over 24 women came forward with reports of enduring gender-based violence and harassment in the factory. And so her union, the Tamil Nadu Textile Workers Union, worked together with Jayastree's family and other workers in the factory to demand justice for Jayastree, but also systemic change. And so the Dindigul Agreement is what came out of that year-long campaign, where the union TTCU worked with allies in the US, like the Asian Pacific American Labor Alliance and CWA, to push the major buyers from that factory to force changes and force the factory to sign on to the Dindigul Agreement. And the Dindigul Agreement, I think, is very groundbreaking in the sense it creates a shop floor monitor at every line of production. And those shop floor monitors have standing meetings with the supervisors. So it's a first step grievance process without being based in exclusively the union. And it also gives the union right of access to the factory. But workers on the production line can report any grievances, doesn't have to be gender-based violence or harassment, to their shop floor monitor. The shop floor monitor can bring it up in the meetings with the management. If it's not resolved there, it'll go to another level. And if it's not resolved there, it'll go to an oversight committee that the brands and the union sit on, and the workers sit on. And if the factory does not remedy the situation within the agreed time frame, the brands have committed to cutting off all of their orders from that factory until it's remedied. So it's an agreement with actual teeth, and it's also an agreement where we're moving away from kind of the typical sexual harassment reporting style of where you go by yourself, you go to company HR, which is a department to protect the company and not you. And I've reported sexual harassment or tried to before. I'm sure many people have experienced or attempted to report it. And, you know, you sit in that office, they take no notes, right? And then to get any kind of change, I had to go through my union and fight with my coworkers. And so this, I think, puts the power in workers' hands from the beginning, because you're gathering with your coworkers to talk about the problem in the first place and gives you the opportunity to resolve it on the shop floor. We haven't had any cases go to the oversight committee, to my knowledge, and we're over a year in.
Okay. The Dindigul Agreement is a significant initiative to ensure that the garment industry's workers are treated fairly and that their rights are protected. It will be helpful to know if any companies have come on board and committed to following the guidelines set in this agreement. How are the garment companies reacting to this agreement, and have any garment companies signed the Dindigul Agreement since it was formed?
Yeah, so we have brands that sit on the oversight committee and are committed to supporting the agreement, and also released the year-on Dindigul Agreement statement talking about how the factory has changed over the year that the agreement's been implemented. We have worked with brand allies like Gap and PVH. So we have had really productive conversations and had industry supporters. But we are also facing actors like Nike who have just refused to have a dialogue with us.
I'm interested in knowing whether the factories have a balanced gender ratio, or if there's a significant difference in the number of male and female employees. Can you give us a better understanding of the demographics in these factories and provide the information about the distribution of male and female workers in the garment factories that we're discussing today?
Yeah, so the vast majority of workers in the garment supply chain are women. Most of the supervisors are men. You can see a really detailed breakdown of this if anybody's interested in the Asia Floor Wage Alliance Money Heist report. But it's a very feminized industry, which we see in a lot of sectors. As work becomes lower paid, it's cheaper to hire women. Women become the primary workforce because they're cheaper to hire and they're easier to intimidate, is the thinking, I think. And so we see this in care work, we see this in teaching, is that as jobs are considered more and more low paid, they get like feminized. And in the garment industry, there's a real systemic problem of gender-based violence and harassment because these male supervisors are trying to impose and drive people to finish inhuman quotas that they're getting from the brand to fill the numbers. And so they resort to harassment to essentially get people to go beyond normal human capabilities.
One of the things that I heard in our conversation this morning was that the monthly salary is anywhere from $70 a month to $200 a month, as well as that there is an unbalanced gender ratio in the factories of women to men being the supervisors. And with that being said, my question for you this morning, are women treated more aggressively in these factories?
Yeah, I think it's pretty set up that way, right? There's a lot of discussion, I think, on about culture, and it's an important element, but at the same time, it's very economically set up. It's no coincidence that the supervisors are men, that in India they're of a higher status cost than the women who are working there. It's a very deliberate power hierarchy, and they're relying on it to get a really obscene amount of work done, essentially. And we see this in other ways in other workplaces, right? Bosses always rely on different categories to divide workers. Sometimes they play up racial tensions, sometimes they play up sexism between workers. Try and figure out different ways to keep people divided and scared so that they can profit as much as possible.
All right. And by adopting global labor standards, how does this help the worker?
Yeah, well, as with the Dindigul Agreement, it gives workers teeth to fight the companies that they're working for. So the brands are the decision makers of the factories, right? Often the brands can move factories at any time in theory and have as labor standards get higher, right? And so when you want to change something at a factory level, you also have to demand that of the brands, because otherwise you put a lot of effort into changing a factory and then the brands leave and there's no work for the people there, right? So international labor standards are key because it's an international supply chain with international decision makers. I think it's also what we're trying to do is, as I was talking about, companies will bounce from factory to factory as standards get higher or more expensive. And that's true of countries too. So as a country raises their minimum wage or as they impose new labor standards, the garment brand will just up and leave. And so that is why we had to build an international coalition. It's kind of part of why Asia Floor Wage Alliance was formed in the first place, is because we need to do regional wage bargaining. Otherwise, it becomes a race to the bottom where governments are trying to decide whether it's possible to enforce labor regulations on these companies, and also whether it's even politically feasible to challenge those companies who, in like Bangladesh's case, are doing 80% of the export industry's garment.
Now, as we near the conclusion of this segment, what would you like to say to the listening audience and how to get involved in the Fight the Heist campaign?
Yeah. So one of the key ways that we've been building with people is we have a international committee of rank and file workers, and we've been setting up meetings with worker allies across the US to have people talk about what the fight looks like in their city, to have garment workers talk about what the fight looks like on the ground, and get to people to have like a real conversation. I think it's a very different thing when you hear it from people themselves. And I think we really want to build a mutual relationship that goes beyond like a singular sign-on or a single solidarity statement, right? And we've been working with allies to develop a global labor solidarity committee in the US that is trained and ready to take action to bring workers' voices to the brand leaders in the US that we have access to here. So if you would like to set up a virtual worker-to-worker meeting between your organization and our committee of rank and file union activists from South and Southeast Asia, you can email me at Jeeva, Jeev like Victor, A, at M like Mary, UHIL, at globallaborjustice.org. And we can also talk about how you can take action in your city to bring workers' voices to Nike's doorstep. And we can set up a solidarity visit to a Nike affiliated organization.
All right. Will you give the listening audience your email address one more time?
Yeah, of course. So it's Jeeva, Jeev like Victor, A, M like Mary, UHIL like Leo, at globallaborjustice.org.
All right. Thank you so much, Jeeva, for being with us this morning on CWA Our Power Hour. Only by working together can we create a safe and fair working environment for all those in the garment industry. Until we all win. Stick and stay and don't you dare go away. You're listening to CWA Our Power Hour on KYOK 1140 AM and the all-new 106.5 FM. If you're on the go, you can take us with you on KYOK Radio. .org. Teachers play a crucial role in shaping the minds of the future generation. They not only impart knowledge, but also instill values and morals in their students. Teachers serve as mentors and guides, helping students develop critical thinking, problem solving, and decision-making skills. They create a positive learning environment that fosters creativity and encourages students to express themselves freely. Without teachers, the educational system would be incomplete and students would lack the necessary skills to succeed in the world. Teacher Appreciation Week is up next with Timia Wiley. Good morning, Timia.
Good morning, Errol. Thank you for having me back once again for episode number 10.
That's right, 10.
And today for Teacher Appreciation Week, we want to honor Jesta Bouie, who I lovingly call Coach Bouie. She's a mother of 3 wonderful children, grandmother of 2, an educator, entrepreneur, author, and motivational speaker against domestic violence. She has over 25 years of experience in legal, nonprofit, and business sectors. She graduated from High Point College in 1992 and GTCC with degrees in early childhood education and paralegal, as well as Strayer University with a degree in business administration. Coach Bouie is currently completing her Master's of Art in Teaching at the illustrious, and I'm going to say it again, the illustrious North Carolina Agricultural and Technical State University. Miss Bouie's she is a high school CTE teacher who teaches honors classes and business essentials and entrepreneurship at levels 1 and 2 honors. Coach Bouie is also known as Coach Bouie to many others than just myself and my daughter around the community. She's a head varsity cheer coach and she wears many hats around the school. When not on the quote-unquote boulevard, Ms. Bouie spends time with her family, serving in ministry at her church and in the local community, working on her next best-selling book, journaling, and her other slew of hobbies. Coach Bouie, as an educator, my hat goes off to you and all the other millions of educators across the country. It's not an easy job, and you guys are up against so much. It's not just teaching. There are so many other things that go into that wheel that we call educating. But moving on into today's topic about labor. Where you see the quieting of labor unions, you also see the decline of popularity of trades in the schools. It's important to give our children the correct information about trade schools and the true value of blue-collar jobs. Society told me that in order for me to get my slice of the American pie, I had to go to college and I had to get a 4-year degree. And we all know, as unionists, that is just completely not true. We have to shouldn't say we have to, but it is essential to give children the correct information about trade schools and the true value of blue collar jobs. How do we change the narrative of that? And why do you think it's important for students to know that trade schools are an awesome option for them?
Okay, thank you for that great introduction and for having me. I teach my students that everybody has a place and a position. Everybody's not meant to go to a four-year college. You can be very, very intelligent and not mature enough to actually, so 4 years is a lot of years. And nowadays, people are not coming out of school in 4 years. It's taking them 5, 6, and some 7 to get out to get a degree. I like trade schools or certifications because you don't have to put all of your eggs in the basket, but you need to know the eggs that you have. Because if a job closes down, and we talk about COVID, pre-COVID, COVID, and post-COVID, trade schools are needed because if we don't have somebody to build the bus, somebody to work on the bus, somebody to know about the tire, somebody to know about the engine, what are we going to drive? If we don't have somebody actually driving a car, what's the point? So trade school is very needed. And they're here at my school, and even in a lot of school districts, we see where trade schools are needed, because if we don't have certain trades, 10, 15 years from now, who's going to be doing those jobs? And it's going to affect with the person doing the corporate job. Somebody needs to build a building. Somebody has to be an electrician. And the way I teach my kids, I had a student a couple of years ago that got in our GAP program that's making more than every last one of the teachers that she taught. And she's not even 25. She's on her second house. So when we teach our kids about trade schools and not diminishing them, kids can thrive. People can thrive. I know somebody that's been working the same trade for 20 years. And if he had went and got a 4-year degree, he would have had to work like 10, 15 more years. And he's getting ready to retire because he has a trade. He has taken that trade and turned it into a business. And he has taken the money off of that business to be able to retire early. So we definitely need to teach our kids about trade.
Absolutely, it's very important. And if you ask me, I would say that labor unions made America great. And in order to make it great again, we need to bring these labor unions back. We need to bring the trade unions back. And I think, I thank you. And I understand that there are a lot of other programs out there for children that that lead to other paths of success as well through corporations.
Not even just corporations, for even in the school system that I'm in, I teach entrepreneurship 1 and entrepreneurship 2, and I teach a basic level business essential class, and that's to teach them about any business or trying to get a job, filling out applications, all of that. But in my entrepreneurship 1 class and my 2 class, both of my students, they finish the class, they have a project that's 20% of their final grade, but they also have an accreditation that they get. If they do everything they need to do and they pass this accreditation, they can take that and go apply for a job. I've had a student that passed it, took it, and she made more money than her and her friend working the same job. But because she had this accreditation certificate, the job gave her, I think she said maybe $1, maybe $1.50 more. So I teach my students, go and take a certification, get a trade. You never know the amount of money that you're going to make in it. And if I had known, and I'm 50, if I had known what I know now and the programs that we offer our students now, we have a program called the GAP program where they can actually come to school, get a high school diploma. Certain businesses and companies partnership with these programs. They come to school, they start working for these companies. The companies teach them, and if they need to go to school, the companies pay for it. So they're getting dual education, getting work experience before they're even 25, landing a job, getting real benefits, and they're able to they're set at a better advantage than prior generations, which is great to have.
It absolutely is. And I want to thank you for coming on today and being a part. I also want to say Happy Teacher Appreciation Week. I hope that you are
Thank you.
showered with flowers and candy and all of your favorites.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And Errol, back to
All
you.
right. Thank you so much, Timia and Coach Bouie. You are tuned in to KYOK 1140 AM 106.5, the all new 106.5 FM, Communication Workers of America, Human Rights, Our Power. Take us with you on KYOKradio.org. Up next, we have Mr. Nick Hawkins out of District 3. Good morning, Nick.
Hey, good morning, Errol. Glad to be with you.
I'm so glad to have you on. It's been a fight to get you here, but you are in the studio this morning, and we want you to tell the listening audience a little about yourself for those that don't know.
Well, I come from a really small town in rural Kentucky. I'll tell you a quick story about that. Our district vice president, Richard, and I were going to a meeting in Kentucky, and he said, "Why don't you take me to the area you grew up in, and maybe I can meet your family and see what it's like there." And I told him, "Hey, it's a really small town where I'm from. There's not much there." He said, "Well, it's probably just like the small town I'm from in North Carolina." The next day we come into work, and Richard says, "You know, I Googled Port Royal, Kentucky, where you're from, and the population is 56. The population is 5,600 in the city I'm from." So that small place, there's a famous author who's also an environmental activist from that small town. His name is Wendell Berry, and a lot of people know Wendell Berry. But I come from a small town in Kentucky, and I started to work for Bell South, now AT&T, the day after I graduated from high school. And I've been here about 24 years now. And immediately when I started to work there, they gave me a contract book and said, "Here's all these rights that you have as a union member. Sign this card." I did it, and shortly thereafter became a job steward, then local vice president, and then I served as president of 2 different locals in Louisville, Kentucky. Was my last stint as local president before coming to work at the District 3 office after Richard Honeycutt was elected district vice president. And I've got a lot of community activism that I was involved in Kentucky. I was an elected magistrate or member of fiscal court there in Kentucky in Henry County, and just always been interested in trying to help people. And I think that's the mission that we have here as unionists, is to help our members.
District 3 just wrapped up its conference in Louisville, Kentucky. Can you give us a little short recap of what went on in District 3 conference this last week?
Well, I'll give you a highlight and then tell you what I think the basic concept or the most important thing that we do at the District 3 meeting is network with one another. Mm-hmm. It's a time to get to know people that you, for example, if you're in South Florida, you don't know people in Tennessee. But once you get connected, you're able to work together and make a difference for your members. One of the highlights for me personally, Louisville, of course, is the city that I worked in as a technician for AT&T. And our new president of CWA, Claude Cummins, was there and scheduled to speak at the District 3 meeting. What was really special was that he said, "I want to go out and talk to members. Mm-hmm. I want to visit a work site. I want to go to a call center and talk to our members." So it was a real pleasure for me to go with our international president, Claude Cummins, and meet with the technicians in the morning. And it was impressive to see him really interested in what they wanted the union to do for them. Mm-hmm. So that was a special thing.
Well, CWA District 3 prepares for AT&T Southeast Showdown. Our contract is about to end in August. So can you provide to us a bargaining and organizing update?
Yeah, we just had a mobilization meeting this morning with our mobilization team. So we have a fellow that's serving as a campaign lead who's orchestrating building a mobilization network across the district. We have point people in each state, then in each local, and then at each work site to prepare for mobilization. So we're getting geared up. Bargaining starts in the middle of June, and we have our task force meeting scheduled here in about 2 weeks, where we take all of the bargaining suggestions from our membership. We come together and look through all of them, sort them, and see what are the priorities that our members are asking for in bargaining. And then after that task force meeting, we'll take those recommendations from the membership, meet with the bargaining team, and start drafting formal proposals for negotiations. I'll say this, we had a historic strike in 2019, and it was the largest strike in the South in 30 years. And I think our strike there in 2019 was a spark that lit a big fire. And now you see this carrying over into the UAW, Teamsters, and some of the strikes that they've had. And ultimately, it resulted in some big wins for their members. We think that now we're set up to do even better here in 2024 than we did in 19. And I hope that that mobilization network we've got in place will give us the strength we need at the bargaining table to make some big improvements for our members.
All right, mobilization training is underway. Is it too late, or can our CWA union members, brothers, sisters, siblings still sign up for mobilization training?
You can still sign up. I think year to date, we've trained about 500 members, and the goal is to get 1,500. So we've still got a ways to go. I think we have something like maybe 30 classes that are already scheduled, but we're wanting to schedule more. The goal is to train 15% of our membership. And in some areas, that's easy to do. If you're in a large city, when you're spread out in a rural area, sometimes it's hard to bring people into a central location to do a class, but you can definitely still sign up. Encourage our members to reach out to their local president and say, hey, I want to get involved in mobilizing for the contract.
All right, as Claude, our president, international president, would say, unity is our greatest strength. Our power is in our people, and the union will always stand together. Thank you so much for being with us this morning, Mr. Nick Hawkins.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Up next, we have Mr. Reginald Small talking about broadband and giving us an update.
Good morning, KYOK radio listeners. I am Reginald Small, Civil Rights and Equity Chairperson. With us this morning, we welcome Mr. Keith Busby, CWA District 3 Broadband Lead. Keith is one of 2 district leads responsible for the 9 states in CWA District 3. Keith has worked on multiple projects related to broadband improvement for the state of North Carolina. He was the project manager for a CWA Microsoft joint project for the ACP program, Affordable Connectivity Program, to help make broadband affordable to those in need in North Carolina. Keith has also worked with the NCDIT to help close the digital equity divide. Recently, Keith has been appointed to the North Carolina Department of Information Technology Labor Task Force to help NCDIT deal with labor shortages as the state begins to roll out its broadband improvement program. As a member of CWA legislative political team, Keith has worked to establish relationships with elected officials from state, federal, and local government. Keith is a 24-year member of CWA since his hiring with Bell South in July of 2000. Welcome to the show this morning, Keith. How are you today?
Good morning. Good morning. I'm well and hope you are too. Thank you for the invitation.
Yes, glad to have you. So we can delve right into it. If you could tell our radio listeners, what exactly is ACP and how can we support it?
Sure. So ACP program is the Affordable Connectivity Program. It's basically a government program that helps make the internet affordable for people in need. So based on your economic situation, you could receive a $30 per month stipend towards broadband to make it affordable for families that, obviously need the assistance.
Great. I appreciate that explanation. We're hearing a whole lot about broadband. And I would like for you to tell us what does it actually mean to be a broadband lead?
Okay, so, broadband in this country, it covers a lot of things. And so what I do is I advocate for, like the ACP program, folks that, need access to the internet. I also work with the LPAT team, CWA LPAT team, shouts to Grant Welch. As far as, meeting with senators, representatives, the actual, I guess the behind the scenes politics that's involved with broadband. I also have a dynamic that is labor related as well, because obviously we that work is what CWA members do. So that work is obviously important to us. It's the bread and butter of working in the telecom industry. So I do a couple things, man. So some days I got to put on a suit, some days I put on a shirt, some days I put on boots, but either way, I'm still working.
Well, good. It seems like you're doing absolutely amazing work, and we thank you for that. I actually heard that you and the Broadband Brigade were invited to the White House, I believe, in the month of December. And if you could share with us a little bit about that visit, what that was all about, and if you could definitely expound a little bit about a famous quote I've heard that you've cloned there that says, "Internet is a utility."
Sure, I would love to. So first, let me just say that was one of the most incredible moments of my life, and I can't express enough how the Biden administration has doubled down and invested in American people, because we actually were invited there specifically to talk about obstacles that we're running into. And I mean, like Broadband Brigade, which is, what I'm a part of, is a nationwide organization inside CWA. So we, long story short, there's this process, it's called the BEAD program, right? And this is part of the Build Back Better initiative by Biden. $42 billion invested in improving the broadband infrastructure in across the country. North Carolina received some money as well. But long story short, they asked representatives from the Broadband Brigade to come to the White House to meet with staff, meet with the people that are working on the legislative side with the policies, to get our input on what obstacles we're running into with dealing with the states, what obstacles we're running into with dealing with the company. I mean, that's massive, because most of the time you see policy and politics and then they don't care. So, hey, we put it out there and then do your best to make it work. In this aspect, we were able to go back to the founder and say, okay, yeah, you did this, but this is what needs to change, or this is what we see that's a headache, or this is what we see that's in the way, that if we fix this, it could be more transparent. So that was huge. And to tie on that, with the $42 billion that we're putting in this country, there's something that we have to understand. And that is old telephone service, POTS, like technicians call it out in the field. That really doesn't exist anymore. Most people don't have a landline phone, but they do have internet, by whether it's cellular or whatever it is. And that's where the comment came from. People need to realize that broadband is a utility. COVID showed us that when people had to go home and work from home or send their kids home, then they realized, hey man, we can't get this done with what we got as far as the internet. Yes. So, I'm concerned, and I'm gonna wrap it up. I'm concerned that, right now with the Affordable Connectivity Program, we're about to cut the funding for a program that makes the internet accessible for families in need, even though the country's spending $42 billion to improve the infrastructure. People still not gonna be able to have access to it. So, we need to, the only way we can really guarantee that is to put pressure on folks to make this a utility. Make it a utility, then everyone has to have it. It's basic human right: lights, water, internet. And so
you're absolutely right, Keith. You've given us some insight on that, and I too agree that internet is basically a utility, and COVID has shown us that. Keith, we're definitely going to invite you back. You have such insight that you can share with us on broadband, which is a very, very important subject going on now in our union and in our country. We thank you for coming on the show today, and we will have you back. Thank you for your time, and thank you, KYOK radio listeners. Back to you, Errol.
As we come down to the final moments of the show, we're going to wrap it up, and we're going to give Reginald a break in his losing streak. But tune in next week for another segment of Our Power Trivia. We are vastly approaching the CWA National Human Rights Conference from August 11th through 14th in beautiful Houston, Texas. We hope that you have already made your plans to attend, and if not, there is still time. Make your reservations today. We thank all of our guests once again for being in the studio with us today. Jeeva Muhil, Coach Bouie, Nick Hawkins, Keith Busby. An hour is not long enough to be with you, and a week is too long to be away from you. You have been tuned into the CWA Human Rights Justice Our Power broadcast. I hope something you heard today has inspired you to take action toward creating positive change in the world. Every person has the power to make a difference, no matter how small. And by working together, we can create a world where human rights are respected and valued. So, I encourage each of you in the listening audience to reflect on your role in promoting human rights to affect change in your communities and beyond. Know that you are not alone in your quest for a more just and equitable world. When faced with injustice, it can be easy to lose hope and give up. But remember, justice may be slow like the truth, but when it finally comes, it will stand. Until next Thursday, 10 a.m. Central Standard Time, right here on KYOK 1140 AM, 106.5 FM, KYOKradio.org.